I'm Joe, and I have too many homemade pinhole cameras. I'm going through my inventory of pinhole cameras, reviewing all of them, and eventually I'm going to get rid of most of them. Hey, welcome back. So 2 videos ago was part 1 of Joe's pinhole cameras, and between then and now, which is part 2, guess what I did? Yeah, I made another pinhole camera. I know, it must be a disease, but we're going to pick off where we left off on the last video of this series, continuing our discussion with my friend and fellow camera maker, Ethan Moses. I hope you enjoy it. So then somewhere in the late 90s, I got interested in making paper negative cameras that operated like roll film cameras. This was the first one I built. This was one of these decorator craft boxes at Hobby Lobby that you use with a tissue box. It's a bare piece of wood that you would use with a square piece of tissue. So I put some wooden pieces up here to make a simple guillotine shutter, and I actually have a little rail here for putting contrast control filters, you know, multi-grade filters. It has a couple spools. What I'm using is a strip of black plastic, and these are cut down from the boxes of photo paper, the envelope, right, the liner, right? And what you do here is you take an 8x10 sheet of photo paper, split it lengthwise to make 4x10 strips, and then on the inside of the plastic you have these areas that have gaffer's tape, and that's where you tape the paper with masking tape. Right? And so then on the outside of the paper sleeve you have frame numbers that are indicated with masking tape, and you can see those frame numbers with a red filter through the back of the body. So these things roll up, and I should probably mention before I get any further that the uniqueness of the design of this camera was all about making room. So if you imagine there's a triangle from the pinhole to the film plane here, well, these other half triangle sections outside the image area is where the spools are for the paper. And so I had to have a way of keeping from fogging the paper. So I have these wooden baffles that simply slide in place that you can remove that reveals the spools on the inside. And you would wind them up like that.
It looks like you have some guide rollers on the side here.
Yeah, there's actually, yeah, so these are bamboo barbecue skewers with heat shrink tubing on them, and they just serve, and it actually does roll a little bit. They're sharpened to a point, and they just roll through a little hole, and so that makes the photo paper can kind of roll over those corners a little bit easier.
That is wild. I am really curious about building roll cameras for paper.
So it's 8 shots the way this is configured. The downside of this particular design was that the spindles I'm using are just bolts, and you have to curl the paper so sharply to get them on there that it really badly curls the paper. So there was another camera that I don't have, and there's a whole story behind that. I built the most beautiful wooden camera, and it's the size of a larger shoebox, and it used 2-inch PVC pipe as spools. Same principle, but you didn't bend the paper as much, and it was just built out of the thin model plywood, and it was beautiful. And it got sort of stolen. We had a camera exchange on F295 back in the maybe 2007 time frame, and mine went to the Black Hole in Chicago. And the Black Hole in Chicago kept all the cameras. Anyways.
I think it would be really fun to build something like this. Joe was at my house the other day, ogling my empty 3D printer filament reels for a camera like this.
Yes.
I said, Joe, take all of them.
Well, I do have a book, and we'll show you later. I have a book of images, an essay of photographic images that I did with that other camera that works the same as this one, and it was really beautiful, and I was really excited about it. But this camera is small and lightweight and operates on a really light tripod, like a homemade tripod, and it's just elegantly light and simple. And
yeah, it is also like really
Yeah.
Super sturdy. I like this a lot. I think I would be interested in making some really, really big reels.
Yeah.
Maybe to shoot 100 pictures or something like that.
So the problem with this camera, of course, every design has a downfall, and the downfall was the finicky process of loading and unloading. You're cutting paper, you have to unreel that black plastic strip and kind of carefully tape them. So it's not as easy as like loading film holders, and you certainly need a darkroom. You can't do this in a changing bag. You got to have a darkroom to do it in. But there it is. That's that camera. It's the prototype of, like I say, one other roll paper camera and a whole nother slew of ideas I have up here for how you could do that. I mean, you could have a massive cookie tin reels of paper, hundreds of feet of photo paper that you could feed through like that.
I think I've got a bunch of things I've got to do that are more important, but that is high on my list of things that I would like to try out when we've got some time. Is a big reel.
So I went from the self-loaded cameras, multiple shots. I went to building your basic plywood pinhole camera that used a film holder. And the initial version of this camera, I built a ground glass view screen, and I use a 1/8" viewing hole. And the way this works is the pinhole plate is held on the front with a square piece, and you can pull the pinhole plate off if you push it through from the back, and you put on the viewing hole, and then the viewing hole permits you to put the ground glass in, and you can actually look at the picture on the ground glass. It's going to be soft, but it'll give you framing, a concept of how the image is framed, right? That particular system worked with a series of cam rollers. There were 2 of these wooden cylinders with mounted off center, and you would put the ground glass in and then turn them down like a cam to lock the film holder in place, so you had a view of the entire film holder. Later on, though, I decided that I wasn't really using the view screen that much, because I really had evolved to the point of using viewing dots for previewing the composition. And so as a consequence, I decided, instead of having that complex cam system on the back, that I would just retrofit it to make a hand grip. Kind of a hand grip that holds the film holder like that, and you use a little piece of foam core to wedge it in place. Right? A stupid, simple solution, but it works, right? The whole secret to the light trap on this camera is this little plate is metal. It's galvanized steel that makes, and your little slot here is where the little ridge of the film holder locks into. And then everything else is like craft foam, kind of gives you a nice dark surface. An internal pull shutter. And there is a brass tube that goes through the top of the camera, and I'm using a brass rod with an acorn nut soldered on, and that serves as one of the viewing dots to line up the image on there. So
were these dots original to the camera, or you added those?
No, added those. Yeah, those are little brass screws that I used as dots, and then the ones on the side as well. And I even went to the trouble of noticing that the pinhole is actually in front of the camera. It's raised up a little bit, so my viewing dots on the front, they don't quite converge. Yeah, it's a nice camera. So I can still use, of course, the viewfinder if I want to, but I usually use the viewing dots. And it's a very rugged, heavy-duty camera. You're not going to break it.
Built it from 3/4" ply and weighs about 8 pounds.
Yes. Yeah, the volume to weight ratio, it's not very efficient, but it's very stable.
I like it. It's Ethan style.
Yeah.
I build a lot of beds and tables out of 2x4s. They're not pretty, but you can park a truck on them.
Yep. Oh, and there's actually photo paper in here, I just discovered.
Well, don't open it, then.
Okay. There you go.
Hey, have
partially
you seen,
fogged.
The Leonardo cameras by Eric Renner?
Yes. I actually visited Eric Renner in San Lorenzo about 15 years ago. We were on a trip to Silver City. I just called him up and say, we're in town. Do you mind if I come by? And he was so gracious, and he let us, he showed us all his cameras. And
wild.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet him someday.
It was pretty cool. But anyway, that's the 4x5 basic box camera. So back on the subject of how do you get multiple sheets of paper in one camera? And then the other idea that struck me was, let's have a carousel. And I don't really remember which one I come up with first, maybe this one. This is a double-decker camera. It has an upper section with 4 pictures, and a lower section with 4 pictures, and each one has its own shutter, like that, and a pinhole that slides out like that. So the heart of the camera is, like everything else, held together with gaffer's tape, but it's...
By the way, I've not figured out how this works. I have no idea.
Okay, so there is a knob, and it has 4 positions, 1, 2, 3, 4. And those 4 positions, they control these 2 bolts that you're turning, like that. And there is a rotor in the camera that's made from galvanized steel. Again, you can solder galvanized steel and paint it black. And there are 4 positions corresponding to the 4 sections on each thing. And there's 2 holes up here that engage the 2 holes when you put the lid on. So you basically turn the camera like that, and each of the 4 sections has 2 pictures, one above and one below. And the film plane is a curved film plane. So it's kind of, I'm using these little pieces of black paper to help you get the photo paper out later on. But it's a slightly curved film plane. And then, oh yeah, the bottom of the rotor has a little protrusion that acts like a axle that sits into a washer that's the sort of like a bushing on the bottom. That's what it rotates on.
This has got to be one of the most ridiculous cameras I have
It is
seen
totally ridiculous.
I kind of expected you to like turn this in it to go, the cow says moo.
We would have a string
Right.
and have a little voice if that was the case. But functionally speaking, the lid goes on, and the hard part is really getting the 2 bolts to line up with a hole. But if you assume the rotor's in there, you would basically turn this to the number 1 position, you got 2 shots. Number 2 position, you got 2, so 8 shots total. So. And of course, it does not have a tripod bushing, but I could have made one. This was a spare countertop material from some kitchen remodel or whatever. It's built of masonite board.
It's super heavy.
And it's like...
Which is something I love.
Yeah, it's 5/8 square poplar sticks, a space frame, and then masonite glued onto it, and yeah. So.
This is a really wild camera, Joe. I love this one.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, but it also, I mean, it's functional in like the best of absurdist ways. Yeah. Have you shot a lot with it?
Somewhat, yeah. You would actually expect it to be like a Jack in the Box. You expect a creepy clown guy to pop out of the camera.
I had no idea what would be inside when I saw this. That's great.
Yeah, so, obviously you're going to cut, then the film format is I can't remember what it is, some special format. It's not standard 4x5. So you have to cut the film to size. You load up 8 pieces, and then you have to get the bottom of the carousel in that little hole in the washer and it's fiddly. It could be improved. It's a little thing where you have to hold your mouth right, but then you load it up, and then you got 8 pictures.
That's great. This reminds me of earlier this summer when we started doing those direct positives in color, and we needed to tape all of these things to my paper cutter so that in the dark we could make the perfect jigs.
Exactly.
Wow. I love this camera. What a weirdo thing.
Well, so the Carousel cameras were a series of sketches, and I had ideas for like Rolodex cameras, a big rotary thing with 200 pieces of photo paper, and I never did come up with a reliable way to rotate it. But I have this one that is made from a cookie tin, and it uses a wooden handle, and there are 2 pinholes, A and B. They're F235. It's just a rotor of, there's 4 compartments, and the left sides are exposed by one pinhole and the right sides are exposed by the other. And
does the left side fog the right at all?
I haven't seen too much of that, actually. No, it's amazing.
And you just hold the paper on with tape?
Yeah, you just hold the paper on with tape, yeah. Just a loop of masking tape in here. And so it's real simple. It's 8 shots, 2 pinholes, a real simple rotor device. And the rotor is suspended from the lid, so there's no, well, there is actually sort of a bearing in the bottom. It's a washer taped in there with a piece of gaffer's tape, and there's a screw head that goes in the hole of the washer that kind of supports it. And the thing about these cookie tins is they're sort of automatically light tight, although you might want to run a electrical tape on it or something like that. Whatever.
Just like a 100-foot roll of film.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you have 4 different positions on the rotor here, and it's just very basic, right?
Before I knew what this even was, when I thought it was a speak and say, I love that, you know, this just has such a nice action.
Oh, yeah.
It's you know, mechanical movements and simple cameras is my thing.
The secret is the bearing surface made out of foam core, or is it craft foam? But something like that in there that it's just floating on.
That's great. I'm going to take advantage of that. Yeah. Super good.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank Ethan Moses for all the time he took in helping get these videos made. And if you guys are interested in 3D printed cameras, the kind of products that Ethan puts out, I would advise you to go visit Cameradactyl Cameras. So this was the second in a continuing series. We still have quite a bit to go on my history of my pinhole cameras. These 4 we covered today. And it was kind of fun sifting through all my 3-ring binders, stacks of them full of paper negatives. And these shots that most of these I showed you today were inversions of paper negatives, but the ones earlier taken at the VLA radio telescope in New Mexico, done with this camera, was taken on Harman direct positive paper, and that's some of the best results I've ever had on Harman direct positive paper, in fact. So, well, I'm interested in your comments. What do you think about these camera designs, and do these designs inspire you guys to make your own cameras? Well, I hope so. Leave some comments down below, please. And until next time, as always, stay creative. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.